Hello and welcome to UGC Pathshala. I am Dr. Swikar Lama, Assistant Professor in Criminology and Police Studies at Sardar Patel University of Police, Security and Criminal Justice, Jodhpur. I am going to present the module on crime prevention, anticipation, recognition, appraisal, initiate and action. The learning outcomes of this module are to make the learners understand the various concepts of crime prevention, to make the learners understand various methods of crime prevention, and to make the learners understand the terminology of anticipation, recognition and appraisal, and also initiation of action with respect to crime prevention. Crime affects all of us. It can endanger our personal safety, damage public and private property, create fear and lower a quality of life. Today, crime prevention is a concept that is extremely widespread. The view that crime prevention is the most important means of combating crime is coming very much into the picture in studies as well as in debates on crime. But even journals and magazines that have nothing to do with this issue, the daily papers as well as the means of mass media tend to use the notion of crime prevention and the related phrases over more frequently. What is crime prevention? Crime prevention is the anticipation, recognition and appraisal of a crime risk and the initiation of some action to remove or reduce the risk, as per the definition of the crime prevention defined on the official website of New York State Police. Crime prevention is an active approach utilizing public awareness and preventive measures to reduce crime. Crime prevention reflects a philosophy of self-defense where the police and the community take action before crimes are committed. Crime prevention programs will reduce crime, stimulate public awareness concerning crime prevention and enhance our communities. Crime prevention works. It is cheaper, safer and healthier for communities to prevent crime than to have to treat the victims, deal with its perpetrators and lose civic health and productivity. The responsibility of crime prevention doesn't fall on one person, it's everyone's business. Law enforcement agencies, however, are the focal point in the community crime prevention. This can be beneficial to prevention efforts because these law enforcement officers know what crime is happening, where it is happening and by whom it is happening, have the expertise to stop crime before it happens, and they can bring community members, police departments and government officials together. Crime prevention is a multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary and integrated endeavor. The mission of crime prevention is to reduce the opportunity for crime and fear it produces by developing police-community partnerships to enhance safety and improve the quality of life. The principles of crime prevention need to be taken care are: crime prevention is everyone's business. More than security, it is a responsibility of all levels of government. It is linked with solving social problems. It is cost effective. Crime prevention requires a central position in law enforcement, cooperation by all elements of the community, education, tailoring to local needs and conditions, continual testing and improvement. Crime prevention improves the quality of life for every community and its residents. Now, what is the need of crime prevention? The need to address crime is as old as civilization itself, and while we have always struggled with whether to punish or rehabilitate criminal activity, there has never been any question that the best alternative to illegal behavior is prevention. Yet, while history is filled with examples of punishments for given crimes, the evolution of prevention is not as easily defined. Perhaps that is due in some part to the militaristic viewpoint that tends to prevail in history, or maybe it is because prevention is not considered as exciting as investigation, arrest and sanction. In any case, prevention as a basis for policing was first formulated in England with the passage of the Metropolitan Police Act of 1829. Prevention was the ultimate goal of the organized police force and the prevention philosophy translated into practice. Thus, English law enforcement officials chose not to arm themselves. Armament was viewed as a reaction to crime, not a way to prevent it. Over the ensuing years, however, the prevention tradition established by Robert Peel in England was overshadowed by a growing emphasis on investigation, arrest and punishment. This was likely due to the growing impact of criminal activity. The three types of prevention are punitive, corrective and mechanical. It remains relevant today and offers insight into how law enforcement and other institutions attempt to fulfill their crime prevention duties. Now I will talk about punitive crime prevention. According to legends, punitive crime prevention is an attempt by law enforcement to forestall crime through the threat of apprehension and punishment. Punitive crime prevention is manifested by the enactment of tougher laws, longer sentences and from a law enforcement perspective, preventive patrol. The enforcement of spreading laws is an example of punitive prevention. The fear of getting caught has a deterrent effect, especially among the population that has a tendency to be law-abiding. Unfortunately, individuals intent on committing crime seldom believe that they will be caught. Now, corrective crime prevention. A basic premise of corrective crime prevention is that criminal behavior is caused by various conditions such as poor housing, poverty, lack of education, family problems, and drug and alcohol addiction. Those who subscribe to this theory believe that crime can be avoided if the conditions under which crime is thought to flourish are elevated. Unfortunately, there is no consensus as to the causes of crime. Quite often, the conditions that are expounded as crimes are little more than excuses for the behavior of those who commit crime and for a system that cannot control it. Now, protective crime prevention. Preventing crime in this manner suggests the need for law enforcement, other government agencies and the community to initiate an organized process for reducing or removing the opportunity for crime through data collection and analysis, the accurate identification of problems by a number of factors, development of crime control objectives and strategies and implementation of the strategies. Protective crime prevention is the basis for the concept of crime prevention as we know it today. It is embodied in the standards that have been established here. Furthermore, it is implied in the definition of crime prevention as established by the National Crime Prevention Institute in the early 1970s and embraced by most crime prevention experts. It also embodied in the community policing and problem-oriented policing concepts. It clearly recognizes that the control of crime and associated problems is beyond the capability of law enforcement alone. Now, situational crime prevention. Situational crime prevention has been defined as the use of measures directed at highly specific forms of crime which involve the management, design or manipulation of the immediate environment as in a systematic and permanent as a way as possible. It is sometimes referred to as primary prevention or opportunity reduction. A situational approach to crime prevention is rational choice theory as its basis. That is, it rests on the assumptions that offenders freely and actively choose to commit crimes, that the decision to commit the crime is made in response to the immediate circumstances and the immediate situation in which an offense was contemplated, and the motivation to offend is not constant or beyond control. That is, it is dependent on a calculation of costs and rewards rather than being the result of inheriting or acquiring a disposition to offend. Crime prevention is defined as the anticipation, recognition and appraisal of a crime risk and the initiation of some action to remove or reduce it. This definition describes a three-part process for preventing crime. It indicates the need to identify the crime risk, develop a plan of action and implement the plan in order to remove or reduce the risk. None of the three parts stand alone, each one builds upon the one before it. Anticipation. To anticipate a crime risk is to foresee it. For example, one of the crucial determinants in a security-related lawsuit is whether or not the crime is foreseeable. A law enforcement agency should be able as much as possible to foresee crime patterns or trends in a given area or neighborhood based on crime reports and service call logs. Now, recognition. To recognize a crime risk is to identify through a systematic means of collecting and analyzing data. This enables an agency to determine what, when, how, where, by whom, and sometimes why criminal activity is taking place. If an agency cannot answer these basic questions, it cannot begin to control or prevent crime effectively, nor can it provide the expertise to the community to enable anyone else to do so. Formalized crime analysis units can provide much of the data needed to direct a crime prevention effort. However, in an order for a comprehensive plan to be developed, additional information is needed from other sources, including the community planning department, residents, and other businesses. Now, I will talk about appraisal. To appreciate the crime risk is to assess or to evaluate in terms of danger to the community or neighborhood. Is a particular crime more or less severe than others being experienced in the locality? Again, such an appraisal will rely heavily on the analysis of data. Initiate an action. To initiate is to introduce. For government, action is analogous with service or response in public safety. It often denotes a tactical response to a problem. Controlling crime in a community requires both tactical and strategic action. A tactical response is appropriate for specific short-term problems. Strategic action works best for long-term problems. Both require planning. Stated differently, initiating an action means developing a plan, short-term or long-term, in response to the risks identified. Unless the law enforcement agency is involved in a crime control planning process that involves all units and divisions within the agency, other government agencies and the community, it is unlikely that it is actually engaged in comprehensive crime prevention. Now, to remove or reduce risk. To remove or reduce the crime risk is the implementation phase and produces the end results. In short, it is the opportunity to carry out the actions that were planned in response to the risks identified. While it may be easier just to move to the implementation phase in response to a problem must be based on accurate analysis of the problem and identification of appropriate actions to alleviate it. The philosophy of crime prevention has received wide acceptance and is implemented through community policing and problem-oriented policing. Now, let us discuss about various strategies for crime prevention. A model for devising situational crime prevention programs has been suggested by Marcus Felsen, who combines physical design and kinetic management in the fight against crime. Felsen sees both criminals and victims as creatures of habit going about routine activities. Felsen's routine activity approach to crime analysis specifies three elements of crime: a likely offender, a suitable target, the absence of a capable guardian against crime, or an intimate handler, that is, a person close to the offender who is able to impose informal social control and prevent him or her from committing an offense. Crime occurs when victims and offenders converge in the absence of a guardian or intimate handler. Crime can be prevented by keeping potential offenders and potential victims apart. Using the routine activity theory approach, Ronald Clark and Marcus Felsen have categorized a number of situational crime prevention strategies thrown up by successful case studies. Namely, those are like reduce convergence of targets and offenders by separating the elderly from teenagers and children in public housing, for example, constrain offenders by strengthening social controls like through smaller classes in schools to cut down vandalism and rowdyism, restricting access to facilitates or means of committing crimes, example by placing a ban on aerosol paint sprays to juveniles, or restricting access to disinhibitors such as alcohol, which might lead some people to commit crimes, example by banning the sale of alcohol at football games. Now we can also protect targets by target hardening through using vandal resistant materials in public places, installing burglar proof barriers in taxis, restricting access to places where crime could be committed, example by placing entry phones on entrances to public housing to keep out intruders, and erecting barriers at bus queues to discourage pickpockets, reducing the value of the target by inscribing belongings with identification numbers and limiting the amount of money in cash registers, reducing visibility, example by not undressing in front of a lighted window or by making sure a house looks occupied, enhance guardianship by increasing surveillance, real apparent, example through neighborhood watch, illuminating the inside of banks at night, assigning responsibility, example by training employees to challenge potential offenders, increase the capability to intervene, example through radios for bus drivers. Now let us talk about the two aspects needed to maintain crime prevention standard. First is organization. When the English Parliament passed the Metropolitan Police Act of 1829, its first order was that it should be understood at the outset that the principal object to be attained is the prevention of crime. To the great end, every effort of the police is to be directed to ensure the positive outcomes by the practice of crime prevention. It is necessary to follow the standards. The delivery of crime prevention services is the responsibility of all personnel within the law enforcement agency. Every law enforcement agency should establish crime prevention goals, objectives, and evaluation measures. Every law enforcement agency should have a formalized crime prevention unit staffed with an appropriate number of full or part-time personnel. The crime prevention unit should be placed strategically within the agency's chain of command. The crime prevention unit should facilitate and coordinate the law enforcement agency's crime prevention mission. Every police agency should initiate a crime prevention planning process which focuses on the identification of historical and emerging crime problems and the development of community-wide strategies to address them. Crime prevention staff should work closely with the agency's planning unit, crime analysis unit, and the locality's community planning department to ensure that the prevention of crime is a primary planning goal. Now the next thing is administration. The work of crime prevention personnel is crucial to the law enforcement agency's success in involving its officers, other government agencies, and the community in anti-crime efforts. This is a critically important aspect of policing. Assuming the Chief of Police or DG is committed to having other agencies and the community involved in efforts to prevent crime and believes that crime prevention and control are the responsibility of various interests within the community, not just law enforcement, the assignment of personnel to the crime prevention unit should be considered one of the most important decisions of the law enforcement executive. Consequently, the crime prevention unit must be staffed at a level that reflects its significance to the mission of the agency. Every law enforcement agency should designate one employee as supervisor of the crime prevention unit. The supervisor should be responsible for directing all aspects of the crime prevention unit and should represent the interests of the unit to the chief executive officer and his command staff. Job descriptions for crime prevention personnel should be prepared and fully understood by those assigned to crime prevention. Crime prevention personnel should possess effective planning and communication skills and should be capable of motivating and directing others. Law enforcement agencies should give consideration to qualified citizens as well as sworn officers when filling vacancies within the crime prevention unit. Crime prevention personnel should be provided appropriate training in methods to reduce or remove the opportunity for crime. Crime prevention personnel should attend advanced or specialized courses designed to strengthen their crime prevention skills in physical security, septed management, and coalition building. Crime prevention should be a line item in the law enforcement budget. Every law enforcement agency should consider using a cadre of volunteers to assist in the delivery of crime prevention services. Now, to conclude, crime is a multifaceted problem. There is no easy fix. Research and experience have, however, provided us with insights into the nature of crime which can help us fight back. Sanctions against criminals are failing to deter increasing numbers of offenders, and the legal and correctional systems are groaning under the weight of business. For their part, citizens are groaning under the burden of the costs associated with escalating crime, of more police, of improved court systems, of more goals, of insurance, of locks and bars and grills on their homes. Criminal justice professionals have freely admitted that they cannot hope to combat crime without the help of the community. Other countries are rapidly reaching the same conclusion. Citizens cannot go about arresting offenders, and we would not wish to see any increase in this number of citizens bearing arms. So, the answer is obvious: crime prevention, particularly situational crime prevention. It is not recommended that only situational crime prevention as the complete solution to crime, however, but only as a part of a global strategy including better policing and programs to alleviate the social conditions which encourage crime. For the individual, householder, situational crime prevention is the most effective approach to protecting him or herself from victimization and fear, but this approach has much wider scope. It can be employed by housing authorities to make public housing more secure, by transport authorities to cut down graffiti and vandalism on trains and buses, by education departments trying to battle school arsonists. Those who oppose situational crime prevention usually do so on the grounds that one person's security is simply another person's vulnerability. That is, they believe criminals who are deterred from committing a crime in one area by tight security or neighborhood surveillance will simply move their criminal activities elsewhere. It is highly unlikely that all thwarted criminals will go on to commit a crime in all cases. Therefore, situational crime prevention cuts the crime rate and is to be recommended on that basis. And also, displacement can be fought if it occurs by concentrating crime prevention efforts where they are obviously needed most. Among those least likely to be able to defend themselves, the elderly, those in inner city, low income areas, and tenants in public housing. As neither crime nor fear of crime is distributed homogeneously across the population, crime prevention needs to be promoted and implemented differently in different areas. The tasks in inner city areas, where people usually have an accurate picture of the extent of local crime, is to convince them that they can protect themselves from crime through their own efforts. In areas where crime rates are low but fear of crime is high, the message has to be communicated that crime is not out of control, but that sensible measures must be maintained for the continued well-being of the community. Thank you.